Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 75 of 2019. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at The Odds Breakers. And follow us on social media /The Odds Breakers. This episode is being brought to you by jazzsports.ag. For a 50% sign-up bonus, please visit Jazz Sports. Use the promo code Odds Breakers. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out with our cost, sponsor the podcast and website, we'd love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. For $17.99 a month, you can get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. For $2 or more, you can have all that and become a patron subscriber. Get the podcast a little bit early. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. My friends, the Atlanta Falcons beat the San Francisco 49ers. Well, does that not just sum up the NFL? So, great weekend, relaxing more or less, and getting some stuff done. Not a lot of college football, and it was kind of, our Saturdays was a little empty this week, and I think it was because the Army-Navy game absolutely sucked. I guess if you're holding a Navy ticket, it didn't suck so much as bad, but the football absolutely sucked. There was one player that game. One player. That's it. And that player was Malcolm Perry. Okay? I mean, that's the only player that was even playing football that day. I guess the trenches played a little bit, but nobody else played. Malcolm Perry went for 304 rushing yards. 304. Okay? I don't even think he threw a pass. But he went out to pass, but he just never threw it. He just ran. And Army can figure it out. Their second player in an option team only had 75 rushing yards. And they won 31-7. Okay? That's all you need to know. Army was that bad that they couldn't even stop one player. They couldn't adjust and even figure it out. It kept just missing. But he also looked like he was in a league completely above them. He looked like he was Power 5, 4 to 5-star recruit, and the rest looked like they were just a bunch of 1 to 2 stars. But I got to tell you, normally Army plays a lot better than they do. And normally they can make some adjustments. But they've just been terrible all year. I mean, they came to plan for a triple option team and they lose 31-7. I guess Navy also ran a lot of read options where the quarterback would either hand it off or run by reading the defensive end. Navy did do that too, but still. Jeff Monken for Army, I am shocked that this team is this bad under him, and I had him higher up in my scale than I do today. You know, and their only drive at the end where they could have at least scored a garbage touchdown to get it within 10 points when there was, 8 minutes left in the fourth, the dude fumbles the ball. Lets someone just rip it out of his hands. That's been happening all year to Army. They have zero discipline. And there's nothing from Army that makes me think that they're going to be anywhere near they were last year. For the way I saw these kids play this year, for next year. I just am concerned for Army. So, great job, Navy. Now, Malcolm Perry is probably not going to be throwing any passes in the NFL. He's going to get shot probably to play with a good team. But I hope he can catch the ball. I don't know if he can. But, if he can catch the ball, then he's possibly going to be decent in the NFL there. So, he's not that big, but he's extremely fast. So, good for him. Navy destroyed Army. in the NFL. Start with the Jets and the Ravens. We won that play, -14. We had the Ravens now. Another reason I played is just that hard. Everyone's like, oh, the Ravens could be flat against the Jets here. Harbaugh, man, he just keeps the pedal to the metal. You see him in preseason. He doesn't let loose to anybody at any time. He doesn't let his team do that. Okay? So I was happy to win that. But at the same time, the Ravens did show a lot of, let's just say, a lot of cracks in their defense. So they can be scored upon. The Jets did score 14 in the fourth quarter, 7 in the second quarter. And I believe they threw a bad interception at one point of that game. But right now, Lamar Jackson is the MVP. He'd have to do something pretty bad to lose it. 5 touchdowns. You kidding me? Yeah, he's the MVP. Bears versus Packers. Well, as soon as that kick-catch interference happened on the Packers there, I decided to I realized my +4.5 wasn't going to fly in the beginning of that game with a 10 to 14 point swing. So that's all you need to know about that game. Although the Bears really outgained the Packers that game, over 100 yards. It was it was pretty significant. Rushing yards were equal. Passing yards was 319 to 192. So 117 yards or so just in the pass. Let's see here. Patriots destroyed the Bengals. No surprise there. We got Tom Brady and his film crew are definitely back into winning position here, it sounds like. And, the Patriots, hard to bet against them in the playoffs. I'm not going to, I doubt I'm going to have too many plays doing that. So, we'll see what happens there. The Buccaneers beat the hell out of the Lions, and I should have bet the Bucs there. I almost did, but the loss of Evans scared me a little bit. But now they lost another guy. I believe it was, Godwin. I think Godwin got injured, and we have to see how bad he is injured. But Bernard Perryman played a great game for them anyway. O.J. Howard got some catches, so not terribly worried about Tampa Bay there. They still have some playmakers there. Next game, what are we looking at here? The Texans versus the Titans. That was a close game now. The Titans kind of gave them a scare at the end and scored 14 points, and that's what made it close. Texans only won by 3 at Tennessee. But Texans were up 14 to zip in the half, so they definitely had control over that game. They were pretty embarrassed the week before against Denver, so definitely could bet the Titans there. Chiefs destroyed the Broncos at home, 23-3. Well, 20 points, I call it destroy, but either way, that game was in the snow, and Mahomes was still scoring points. So that's how that goes. Chiefs' defense looks a lot better than it was. Watch out for the Chiefs. They're possibly the second best team in football. The Dolphins versus the Giants. I'm pissed at myself. I bought back on the Dolphins at +3.5 when I gave out the Giants at -3 a while ago. I gave it out Monday, and before they play the Eagles. And a lot of people were on the Dolphins, and I just did not like Ingram didn't come back for the Giants, and didn't feel like they had a lot of pass catchers. So the Dolphins were winning at halftime, but the Giants came back and rallied for Eli Manning and won that game. So it was a 0 net for me. Well, I actually lost, my percent in that game, but either way, it all factors in at the end. Wish I didn't buy back, but either way, the Giants finally won a game. It's been a while. Both teams are 3-11, and the Dolphins have the Bengals next week. The Eagles versus the Redskins. I was hoping the Redskins were going to pull off that loss, but I got to tell you, if you were on the Redskins at +4.5, 5.5, 6.5, whatever you had it, I want to say that God bless you, because that touchdown at the end was an absolute bad beat and the definition of one. The dude should have just went down. He did not have to score. But, hey, you're a defensive player. You want to pad your stats. You want to get points, right? I guess the game was at 0 too, so maybe it was fine to score there. I guess if there's some clock left, you're not supposed to because you give the ball back. But I'll tell you right now, having that Redskins ticket must have been tough. Thank God that our Redskins were on our teaser at plus 12. So thank God we had it at that. But at the same time, for anybody else, less, not so good. Seattle's versus the Panthers, and this game ruined my weekend, kind of. Seattle was up, had the game in control, 30-10 in the fourth quarter, and they give up 2 garbage touchdowns, not only to ruin my under, it also ruined the spread. I had them at -6, and I pushed on that game, and I could not believe I lost the under to those garbage freaking touchdowns.
Unreal.
Some teams just let up and let teams back in the game. They take off the gas, teams with bad defenses, and that's why my Raiders play lost as well. The Raiders are up 16-3 for most of that game. Most of it. The Jaguars score 3 points in the third towards the end, and then 14 unanswered points to beat the frickin' Raiders at home.
Unreal.
I mean, everyone's saying the Jaguars gave up on their season. I always say it's a spot to handicap it, but you can't guarantee these kids gave up on their season. And apparently they just got a garbage win for no reason whatsoever there. And I mean, that's the NFL for you. It's hard to predict motivation. You just should use it as just part of your handicap there. But at the same time, I had the Raiders more than 6-point favorites here. I had them at least 7.5, whatever it was. So I lost that play. Wasn't too happy about it, and Gruden kind of helped blow that one here. The Raiders defense, with their defense, they should never take their foot off the gas. And the Cardinals knew that, and they didn't take their foot off the gas because they outscored the Browns in the fourth quarter 10-7, winning 38-24. How about that? Poor Baker Mayfield, 30 for 43, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had that interception. And Kyler Murray, he only threw for 219 yards, but was able to get that job done, ran for 56 yards as well. So, they outplayed him. I mean, Cleveland outgained the Cardinals. They outgained them, but the Cardinals just, were more efficient when it came down to it and got more important yards and got the yards that counted and made scores rather than just from the 20 all the way to the other 30. That's what they did. They got the red zone yards. So their side of the field yards, what I'm trying to say. That's early. All right, next game. We have the Vikings at Chargers. I was never in this game, and I got to tell you, there's some pretty big fantasy busts in here. If you had Eckler, Melvin Gordon, or Phillip Rivers, you had a pretty shitty fantasy game. Keenan Allen had 99 yards, couldn't quite get the bonus at 100 if you play fantasy. So Gordon 28 rushing yards. Are you kidding me? Rivers 3 interceptions, 1 TD. Oh, I'll tell you this. The Minnesota side wasn't that great because Delvin Cook got hurt and Mike fucking Boone decided to score 2 touchdowns, just rubbing the dirt in everyone's face that had Delvin Cook in this fantasy game.
Unreal.
I gotta tell you, you can have the best players in fantasy and you're still going to lose every once in a while, especially when it's important, just because the ball doesn't go your way. And that's the same thing that kind of happened when the Cowboys played the Rams.
Well, it's a great day for
me to whoop somebody's ass.
Yeah, I was on the Rams. I mean, the Cowboys didn't beat anybody this year. I kind of regret the play later because it was just a big spot for the Cowboys and not a good spot for the Rams. Dak had a great game. And you know who else had a great game? Zeke. Zeke just killed it this game. Who didn't have a good game? Dallas Cowboys scored 44 points, and Amari Cooper had one reception. Just one. One for their number one receiver for 19 yards. Killed fantasy teams. Zeke, 117 yards, 2 TDs. Tony Pollard, 131 yards rushing and 1 TD. They didn't need to throw the ball that much. I think their defense scored. Okay? I mean, you knew when Dallas was kicking their ass 44 to, what was it, nothing? No, 44 to 7 in the fourth quarter, that you weren't getting any passing yards if you had Amari Cooper. You knew you were screwed. Absolutely screwed. Jason Witten got the touchdown. Okay? Tavon Austin got the touchdown. Just players that you're probably not playing in your fantasy league. So Michael Gallup, 1 catch for 6 yards. So Randall Cobb, 1 catch for -3 yards. I hope you didn't have a Dallas receiver there, because I did in a league, and it certainly hurt. It was absolutely brutal. But the Cowboys bounce back, get the big win, and now they're going to have a big division finish against the Eagles and the Redskins. They should be able to handle. And like I said, the Falcons beat the Niners. Part of this handicap, this was one of our largest plays. The Niners, it was a bad spot for them. They were really hurt. They had 2 division games coming up, Seattle and L.A. Well, L.A. first and Seattle. And they just got done with a very hard part of their schedule. Just beat the Saints in a rough game. It was a bad spot for the Niners. And that's why we took the Falcons. And I'm hoping you guys sprinkled. So any of you, whoever's taking it, or the premium clients here, Jimmy Garoppolo, not terrible. 22 for 32, 200 yards and a touchdown. No interceptions. It's just that Matt Ryan was a little bit better. They didn't need Calvin Ridley. They threw the ball to Julio Jones, Russell Gage, and Austin Hooper. So, that's how that game went. Devontae Freeman only had 39 yards on the ground. Kind of another fantasy bust there. But Mostert had a TD, 54 yards. Coleman only had 4 carries for 40 yards. Mostert has taken over in San Francisco. He is the man there. Okay? So just remember that coming into next game, and possibly even coming into the draft for next year. Matt Breida only 4 carries for 11 yards. So Raheem Mostert is now going to be a possible top 10 fantasy pick, in my opinion, coming into next year. The other part of this handicap is that, the coaches, they used to work together. All right. Dan Quinn, he hired Kyle Shanahan. So they worked together, and that's the year they went to the Super Bowl. So Dan Quinn had a little bit of chip on his shoulder. He wasn't going to let his team not play hard this game, and it turned out well for him because they actually won the game outright. And the Steelers versus the Bills, didn't see much of this game, but judging by the score, the sharp bettors hit that one and the under, and we had the Bills in our teaser with Washington, so I was glad to hit that. Oh, and Mitch Trubisky also went over his 17 rushing yards there too, so we all cashed in on that one as well. So being that we didn't do a recap for college football, since there wasn't really any football, I want to quick go over our Big Ten rankings here for basketball. We did really well last week in basketball, 5-1. So basketball's killing it for NCAA. I have a great start. I'm really happy about that. Premium play, NC State took care of business. Only won by half point against NC Greensboro, I believe, but was really happy about that because a win's a win. Don't care if it's 0.5 or 50. Doesn't matter. And, NC State, they're a pretty good team, but I thought they'd be a little bit better. So I'm hoping that there's a little bit more competition this year in basketball because the ACC is not that good anymore. They don't seem that good, I mean, North Carolina, they're terrible. They just lost to Wofford. They've lost a lot of their big games, and they don't look good. The Big Ten is just all over the place. I'm about to go over that. My best teams are probably the teams that I think are going to be there at the very end are Memphis. I think Memphis is going to be there, especially when Wiseman comes back. I think that Louisville is the other great team in the ACC. Kansas is another one. I think it's going to be there. I think Gonzaga is going to be there. It's Gonzaga, And Oregon, that's the other team. That's the other team to look for. Maybe Dayton and maybe Virginia too. But those are the teams I think that are the best coming towards the end here. I think Ohio State, they're ranked number 1 on KenPom, but they just lost to Minnesota last night. And I would have had them at number 1 in the Big Ten, but not because they lost. Not since they lost to Minnesota. I moved up Maryland. Maryland, I think, is the best team with the upside because I also go by upside here. Maryland's ranked number 8 on KenPom. They only had that one hiccup at Penn State. The game was a lot closer than it looked at 76-69, but they have a lot of top 100 wins. If you see, if you look at their schedule, at least they beat Marquette, beat Illinois, beat Notre Dame, beat Temple. So I think they have a lot of upside because they're big men and they're pretty young, minus Cowan. Anthony Cowan's a stud. He's a senior. He's their point guard and leader of the team. I think it's his year. Ohio State's second, and they're a very close second. They did beat North Carolina, but we're starting to find out North Carolina isn't that good. They beat Villanova. They beat Cincinnati. But really, they have no better win than Penn State when they were at home, when they shot out of their mind. And when they just lost to Minnesota on Sunday night, Minnesota shot out of their mind, over 54%. I'll probably be fading Minnesota next Saturday when they play Oklahoma State. So Ohio State definitely deserves to be second there. I just don't think they're quite championship caliber. They're more like Sweet 16, Elite 8, in my opinion. Could be wrong. Caleb Weston's having a great year. DJ Carton's having a good year. CJ Walker's having a very good year, being a guard there. So we'll see what happens. Next team I have is Michigan State, and no big wins for them yet either. They've had a couple stinkers, 3 losses this year already. For a Michigan State team, that's a little strange, in my opinion. Virginia Tech, Kentucky, and Duke they lost to. I understand that, and I think I mentioned Duke. Duke's one of the teams I think will be in the top 2. I don't think Duke's lost yet, as a matter of fact. So, nope, they lost to that Stephen F. Austin. They had that terrible loss, but they at least beat Michigan State and Kansas. Kansas is, I think, only loss was against them. Back to Big Ten. And I have Michigan State 3 because I think Cassius Winston and Josh Langford have more upside. I think Xavier Tillman's going to be better. Kyle Ahrens is going to get better. And you have, obviously, Tom Izzo there. So next team I actually have is Penn State. And this next bunch of teams, to be honest with you, are very close. It's Penn State, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, and Indiana. And Rutgers is kind of right there, too. But those teams are pretty close. But Penn State, Mike Watkins has been a beast. Dredd, Lamar Stevens is a beast. But they don't have that high of a ceiling. I think they're going to hang around, 4 or 5 or 6 in my Big Ten power ratings pretty much the rest of the year. And same thing with Michigan. I guess if Franz Wagner can become Mo Wagner this season, maybe they do have more upside. But we've already seen what Teskey can offer. Xavier Simpson shows flashes of greatness, but at the same time, he's undersized. And he has that little hook shot that if you can stop that going to the rim, you can stop them. Livers is okay. I like their coach, Juwan Howard. But, that, like I said, that North Carolina win isn't looking so good anymore. And I have Illinois next, believe it or not. Brad Underwood has just a great team. Bashanis Vili, the big Georgian at power forward. You got to love him. Coffee Cockburn is absolutely huge for them. Just a giant down there. Trent Frazier is a great leader. This team was young last year, and I think they have more upside than the Indianas and Iowas. So I have to have them slightly ahead of Iowa and Indiana, but I have Iowa next. And Iowa is playing great, but I think Jordan Bohanna might be redshirting. I have to check the news on that. I am not 100% sure, but I do love Wieskamp, and Luka Garza is playing the best basketball of his career. Luka Garza this year is what I expected last year of him, that step, but he made it this year, so I'm happy about that for Iowa. Indiana's next. That stinker loss at Wisconsin was bad, but they do have some quality wins there. They could sneak right back into the top there. So don't rest on Indiana at all. Rutgers, very impressive. They beat Seton Hall. Now Seton Hall was injured. They have that power forward. His name's forgot about it, but he was out. So Seton Hall's a little bit banged up, but at the same time, Rutgers took care of business against Wisconsin and them at home. Rutgers deserves that step. Purdue just lost to Nebraska, so Purdue definitely downgraded. I do like Matt Harms and Brodeur, but Jahad Proctor is going to have to play a little bit better if he wants to come anywhere close to what Carson Edwards did for this team last year. And then I have Minnesota next, and I like Daniel Oturu a lot down low. He's a rebounding beast. Eric Curry down there too. And then I have Wisconsin 12. I haven't had Wisconsin 12 in years, but they just do not look good. If they can shoot out of their minds, they can beat teams like when they beat Indiana, but they're soft on defense. If they're missing, they're going to lose to anybody, and that's why they lost to teams like New Mexico. And they're 5-5. They have some really bad losses there. Nebraska, they just beat Purdue there. We'll see. That Cam Mack seems pretty good over there. That they're shooting guards. So we'll see what Hoiberg can do with this team. I'm very intrigued by Nebraska because they're so young and up and coming. And Northwestern's dead last, and they're not going to win too many games this year. So just know that. So that's kind of what I see for Big Ten basketball so far. I've been watching a lot of games. Most of my plays have been either betting on, against, or overs or unders on the Big Ten. So been a good year so far. It's time for our college football bowl season free play for this weekend. And we are going with a game in Boca Raton, where Florida Atlantic is going to be hosting SMU here. So both these teams were offensive juggernauts, really. SMU averaging 43 points per game in a pretty tough American Athletic Conference. Opponents scoring 31 points a game, and Florida Atlantic's averaging 35 points a game, and opponents giving up giving up 22 to opponents. Okay, so both teams did really well. Florida Atlantic won their division. SMU couldn't do it because Memphis and Navy were too good. But Florida Atlantic had a pretty tough non-conference from the start. They played Ohio State, and they were able to put up 21 points against Ohio State. Bad game against Central Florida, but ever since then, they won every single game except the Marshall one, losing 31-36. So, in my opinion, the fact that this is at home, I think they're going to be able to score here. I can see at least 30 points for Florida Atlantic. They average 6 yards per play, while SMU gives up 5.7. I see 30 points here, minimum. And SMU, they're averaging 43 against a tougher conference. I can see them scoring some points here, averaging 6.24 yards per play. The important thing that I see is the speed that they play at. Southern Methodist plays at the third highest pace for plays per game at 81 plays per game, behind Wake Forest number 1 and Tulsa number 2. Syracuse is number 4. They're actually played faster than Syracuse. Florida Atlantic is in the top 16. Not too bad at 77 plays per game. So they really pick up the place there. I know Lane Kiffin's not going to be here to coach, and it's going to be an interim right there. But either way, I think they're going to try to put on a show at home. So I'm liking the over here. Take it for 2.5 stars, and I like it all the way up to 75 or 76 points. So big over. I mean, obviously, keep your eye on the weather. It says light rain. I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with winds anywhere under 13 miles per hour.
Business bad? Fuck you, pay me. Oh, you had a fire? Fuck you, pay me. Place got hit by lightning, huh? Fuck you, pay me.
Now it is time for a little fantasy football championship week with a man, D Nasty. All right, then now it is time for our final week of 2019 fantasy football. It is championship week. We got our guy D Nasty back to break down some of these huge pickups and starters for this week. This episode is brought to you by Thrive Fantasy DFS. For a $10 deposit bonus, please visit theoddsbreakers.com/thrive-DFS. Terms and conditions apply. Dave, how is your fantasy faring into championship week?
Not good. Lost a couple close ones this last week to go to the championship. And then I lost first round in a couple of my leagues as well. So not as good as I wanted it to be, but still a fun year though, and a good year overall.
And it's just like my team, best team in your league. And I have Amari Cooper scoring 2 points when Dallas scores 44. Delvin Cook not needed the whole damn game when he beat the Chargers 39-10. You would have think he had 30 points if you see that score 39-10. Eckler, don't you want to talk about that? Hollister didn't do nothing. And Marlon Mack tonight, 34-0. Let's just say that the Colts have given up on their season. So it's, this was an all-star team. Russell Wilson. I even had Terry McLaurin in this week, and he did great. He was one of my sleepers, I think, and he did pretty good. And I was pretty pissed that he only put up 24.5 points. No, I wasn't pissed about that. I was pissed they put up 24 and the rest of my team couldn't do nothing. So I feel you, man. My other teams are doing great, but they're playing for just the first round draft pick. So I'm pretty, I'll settle for third, I guess, but definitely not good. It's tough when you have a great team and they decide not to show up the most important freaking week of the year. So
I hear you.
Yeah, and so that's why we're going to do something a little different for you guys out there. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the most disappointing players throughout the whole season. Now, the way I did it, I didn't look into just this week, but at all, actually. I looked in throughout the season from their draft position. I came up with 5 per major position, not doing defense and kickers. I don't know if Dave's going to, but I'm not. But I'll start out right away with the 5 most disappointing running backs for 2019. And I base this on a 0.5 PPR type league. So number 1 is Saquon Barkley. And the reason that is because where he was picked. He was drafted number 1 and he finished 14th. Okay. Finishing 14th running back out of being the overall first pick in the draft is bad. That's RB2 position, right? You expect him to be at least top 5 or just like top 10 for the fact that I think he only missed 1 game, Dave. I can't remember. It was something like that.
Yeah,
he should have been a lot higher. So he was number 1 for me. Number 2, believe it or not, was Alvin Kamara. He was the top 3 pick, and he finished 18th. I guess the Saints just were mixing it up too much, and he was banged up a little bit, I think. But Latavius Murray took a lot of touchdowns away from him. Drew Brees throwing the ball, and Jacoby Brissett, and their defense really stepped it up. When not Jacoby Brissett, I mean Teddy Bridgewater when he filled in for Brees for 5 games. So Kamara kind of got the shaft a little bit, but 18th, not good for a top 3 pick, Dave. David Johnson's number 3 for me. He was a top 10 pick in most leagues, and he finished 33rd. I don't even know if that's flex worthy. I mean, barely, maybe. It's just there's some receivers that were probably better than that. So David Johnson, terrible year at top 10. And you know what? You can probably kiss his ass goodbye, because I doubt the Cardinals are going to pick up his contract next year. It's pretty high, and especially when they have Kenyon Drake, I don't think there's anything guaranteed left in that thing. Le'Veon Bell is number 4 for me, finished 16th, and he was a top 10 pick in most leagues. Me and you both had him as a bust, though, so didn't have him in any of my leagues. And Devontae Freeman, number 5, finishes 25th and was a top 15 pick. Who do you got for running backs, Dave?
All right, great. For running backs, I agreed with you on a lot of yours, actually. And then I did have a few other ones as well. One of the ones, too, for running backs that I did not like for this year that disappointed as well was Joe Mixon, actually. Poor Cincinnati Bengals team, poor offensive line. He came on at the end of the year, but at the beginning of the year, if you had him in your starting lineups, he just was killing you. Had him in a few of my leagues. He actually lost a few games for me at the beginning of the year, so he was ranked 5th overall on one of my sheets. So he was actually a top 10 running back as well. He definitely disappointed this year. James Conner, another guy that disappointed this year. He was injured for half of this year. He had set at least 4 or 5 games this year. So you can't have your top running back seen out and not giving you any stats for those weeks. So another guy, he's ranked very low right now as well for running backs. Another guy, Melvin Gordon. We all knew he was going to miss a few weeks at the beginning of the year, but when he did come back, he just wasn't the same running back. I think he only had 100-yard game this whole year, so he definitely was not doing it for you either for fantasy football reasons. And another disappointment, who was a top 10 running back possibly, was Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley did put together a few decent games this year, but overall, Todd Gurley did not put up top 10 running back numbers this year.
Yeah, but Ty Gurley was kind of one of those draft picks that you're a little bit worried about, so he fell back a little late, and same with Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon announced his holdout, I think, in most time, so I see what you're saying, though. I mean, you would have thought before the league that Ty Gurley and Melvin Gordon, before, let's just say June, would be, top 5, top 7 running backs, right? So I see what you're saying there for sure, man. Well, why don't you start out with receivers? Who's disappointing?
Well, the first one off my list, the guy I ranked number 20th going into the year on our first podcast, Antonio Brown. If anyone had any Antonio Brown, he did not score any fantasy points for you this year, probably, because he did not play most of the year or any of the year. So Antonio Brown would be the number 1 guy for the most overrated and most disappointing wide receivers this year. Number 2 would be Juju Smith-Schuster, another Pittsburgh Steeler. He did not put up anything close to what he did the previous year. Having Antonio Brown gone definitely hurt, and he's been injured the last 4 or 5 weeks as well. So he definitely hurt teams this well. He was even a borderline bust or drop, actually, about 3 to 4 games into the year. So he was definitely a bust on my radar. ODB, definitely a bust this year. Mm-hmm. I don't think he had a 100-yard game at all this year. Very few touchdowns this year. And then if you look at the rankings, he was one of the lowest ranked wide receivers probably this year. So definitely a bust in my book as well. And another guy too, Devontae Adams. When he did play at the beginning of the year, he did put up solid numbers, but then he did miss a good chunk of the year with that turf toe. So I definitely rate him as lower down the list because I did miss him on a couple of my fantasy teams I had him on. He definitely hurt me on a few of the fantasy teams I did have him on. And then another guy would be T.Y. Hilton. Another injury-prone guy. He had missed quite a few games this year, and when he did play, he wasn't just quite right with all the injuries as well.
You have the exact same ones I do. Nice work. Different order, but for sure, exact same ones. Devontae Adams was my one of my picks because someone snagged Hopkins, and I kind of had him at 1 or 2 for receivers. They were top 7 picks in the whole shebang, and finishing 29th in the rankings on 0.5 PPR, not good at all. Finishing 29th. I had him as the number 1 bust because of how high he was picked. Number 2 was Juju Smith-Schuster. He was a top 2 round pick, finishing 59th, Dave. 59th. That is awful. And yes, injuries plagued him, but it's not like he was ripping it up before then. Part of that was Big Ben's injury too, I guess, right? So you have to chalk that up a little bit too. They kind of go hand in hand. Number 3, I have Odell Beckham, top 8 wide receiver, finished 32nd. Landry was better than Odell Beckham this year, and Landry had a bad year with Cleveland last year with Baker. So it was just a crazy year for poor old Cleveland. Antonio Brown, I had number 4, and all the same reasons you did, but thank God me and you just downgraded the hell out of him. I mean, a lot of people warned people about Antonio Brown before the draft, so that's why he's not number 1 for me. I guess from a talent perspective, he's number 1, Dave. So I can see your angle on talent perspective for sure. T.Y. Hilton is number 5 for me too, and the injuries kind of plagued him, and it really didn't help him that Andrew Luck retired as well. So those are my top 5. Great job there. Glad we see eye on that. We probably both own quite a few of those players.
I did, unfortunately.
Yeah, Adams, Schuster, and Hilton, I think, was the ones that I own. So that was pretty tough for myself. Well, I'll start with tight ends, 5 most disappointing tight ends. Number 1 by far, and we warned everybody about this, was O.J. Howard. Top 5 guy, finishing 30th among tight ends. I mean, 30th. That's just brutal. That's not even like consideration for waivers for a tight end. It's 30. People only roster one tight end most of the time, So it's just what a bum. And Cameron Brate did better than him. Evan Ingram is number 2, just because there was so much talent. Top 5 pick, but injuries plagued him. I was really excited about Evan Ingram too, Dave, and he disappointed me the second half of the season big time. Number 3 is Vance McDonald. He was hyped up before the season started. Top 8 tight end, but he didn't even finish in the top 25. Number 4 is Eric Ebron. He had a great year last year, but just another situation with the luck and the injuries and everything like that threw him out. And number 5 is David Njoku. He sucked even when he wasn't injured, Dave. So those are my tight ends. Who are yours?
Well, I had quite a few same ones as you, actually, Kiev. I do agree with you on a lot of those as well. I definitely had O.J. Howard as number 1 and Evan Ingram 2, with the close 2, though. Those guys you could flip-flop even at 1 and 2, I think. Both of those, Ingram really killed me. I had him in a couple leagues. He started out really hot and fired the first couple games, but then after that, injuries killed him the rest of the year, and he's missed like the last 4 or 5 games as well. So definitely those 2 are my top 2. And then Eric Ebron would be number 3 for me. And then David Njoku is actually 4. Even when he's on the field, like you said, he did not do anything. He came back from injury and he only had like 1 catch for 4 yards, so that's not going to get it done for fantasy purposes. And I'd say at number 5, I had a tie between 2 different tight ends, Jordan Reed and Chris Herndon. Jordan Reed, I don't think he played almost all year. I think he played 1 game maybe all year. And Chris Herndon did not play it. I think he played 1 game this year as well. But even those 1 games that each of them played, they did not do anything in. So 1 game while you're tight end for an entire season is not getting it done. So definitely a downgrade. Those 2 would definitely had tied at my number 5, most disappointing.
Yeah, if you want another consolation prize for that, give it up to old Trey Burton for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. I don't know if he stepped on grass this year. Fuck. He was awful. Just awful, man. Well, I think you're going to rip roar with the quarterbacks, Dave. Who do you have for quarterbacks that are disappointed?
Yeah. I have quite a few for the quarterbacks, actually. Andrew Luck's being my number 1 guy, though. Screwing your team before the season starts, a couple weeks before the season starts, and not even playing for the entire year.
Oh,
so,
dude, that I mean, that's haunting people right now. That, I mean, that was almost as bad as the Le'Veon Bell thing. At least Bell, you can tell he might hold out, but this was out of frickin' nowhere. If you're going to retire, you should have a deadline by June 30th or something, and it's not just for fantasy purposes. He put his team in a bad position, in my opinion. Now you have all these people, you can do what he wants, come as you go. Well, sure. I mean, anybody can come and go as they please. But when there's people that rely on you, like let's just say you're a fire marshal that knows this building is burning, and then you're like, it's employee as you go. I'm going to quit right before, and you know all about the building and the fire. Everyone needs you. Yeah, it's like, yeah, of course he earned the right to quit when he wants, but at the same time, you kind of put some people, including your teammates, in a bad position. I don't know if that's a good example, probably not, but either way, I did not like how that went down. That's my whole point. So that sucks. So keep going, man.
Yeah, definitely Andrew Luck's number one. Number two, I had Baker Mayfield. He's played all year, but just a lot of on and off the field issues. He never started clicking with OBJ. He was a top 5 quarterback going into the year. Definitely disappointed this year. He's one of the lowest ranked quarterbacks, I think, for fantasy purposes this year. Definitely another guy that disappointed. And then number 3, I have Cam Newton. I think he only played a handful of games this year, maybe 2 or 3 games all year, injured all year. He might even be back with the Panthers next year. Definitely one of the most disappointing guys, too, this year. And then I have number 4, I have Jared Goff. He's definitely disappointed this year. He's turned it on the last couple of weeks a little bit, but even the last couple of weeks, he still hasn't put up numbers like he did last year. So I don't know what's the slump. Reason for the slump is this year. But
Goff was also terrible in the playoffs last year. He lost like that week 14 game. I remember having him in a league, and he got like a 1 or a 2 or something, like 2 points, and that just yeah. I mean, and it was against an easy team too, if I can remember right. It was just a terrible perforence, but
it was a great matchup, and he just tanked.
Yeah, yep, and I remember that so well because I had him. So yeah, definitely hating on Golf. I didn't have Golf that high either, so.
No, but definitely disappointment this year because I think a lot of other people might have had him ranked a little bit higher because of the year he had last year. So
yeah.
But number 5, I have Big Ben. Definitely disappointment this year. He was a top 10 quarterback possibly. He only played I think 2 or 3 games this year. He definitely was a disappointment this year as well due to injuries.
100%. He absolutely was. Well, I have the same ones, Dave. Andrew Luck is number 1 for sure. I mean, that's a no-brainer number 1 for all the reasons we said. Baker Mayfield is number 2, and the hype train did not come through, did it? Cleveland missed the playoffs. They have 9 losses already. Just been a complete loser for people, and I wonder what Cleveland fans are thinking. I think it's partly Freddie Kitchen's fault, but at the same time, when you watch Baker Mayfield, you just have more respect for his college coach, Lincoln Riley. Maybe it was more him than anything else. I mean, look what he's doing with everybody. Carson Wentz is number 3 for me, not the MVP that everybody thought, and he's ranked, I think, 11th right now. He should be top 5 by the way he was talked up the last couple years. A lot of Eagles fans are pretty disappointed in him and wish they kept with Foles, the Super Bowl winner, Nick Foles, and I think that probably plays into his brain a little bit. Number 4 is Ben Roethlisberger, that bad injury, just like you said. I hate putting injury guys up here, but it was just so significant, and I had to throw him there. It's disappointing, not saying it's his fault. It's just disappointing that people drafted him in the top 10. Number 5, I have Mitch Trubisky, and it's just because there's a lot of people that thought this was his breakout year, and they're going to see improvement. Like, they probably took him as a pretty late round sleeper type thing, but had a lot higher expectations. But Nagy didn't help him out. Couldn't even establish a run game, and I think that's part Nagy's fault. Andy Rigtree doesn't really know how to run the ball, especially if there's no threat of the pass. Then you really don't know how to run the ball. And Mitch was pretty frustrated. It's funny, after this Packer game, he kind of threw Nagy under the bus a little bit, which I kind of laughed. If anybody shouldn't be throwing people under the bus, it's probably Mitch. But at the same time, he's got some points, what he said about moving the pocket, and I think he dropped back past like 50 times or something ridiculous. So there's some weird stuff there. And so, yeah, that's my top. Cam Newton, yeah, for sure, Dave. But the thing is, I don't think I had Cam too high. We found out that Cam is not accurate at all from the pocket, and if there's no threat of his legs, he's done. So, another team will probably pick him up, but if he's going to be like a head case and expect to be a starter and all that BS, I won't touch him with a 10-foot pole, man. So, we'll see what the hell happens to Cam, but I think he's washed up personally.
I agree. His days are numbered.
Well, let's get into key injuries for Fantasy Football Championship week, and there's some doozies out there. I only put 3 down because these are 3 that are the biggest effect, and Dalvin Cook is number 1. That shoulder injury, not good, but I guess it's not the same injuries he had last week, so that makes me wonder if he is going to play. If I'm the Vikings, this is such an important game against the Packers. It's hard to bench that guy. I don't know. They do have some good talent in the back, and we'll talk about that in the waiver wire a little bit. Chris Godwin, wide receiver, hamstring injury, most likely is going to miss some time. Bad luck for Tampa. That first Evans, now Godwin. They got maybe O.J. Howard's actually going to catch something this week, Dave. I don't know, because they don't have a whole lot of other options there. And I also wrote down Scott Miller because he's Tampa's backup for Godwin, and he injured a hamstring too. So I don't know if he's going to play or not this game. I didn't get a report on that, but that's all I have, man. Who do you have for injuries?
Just a couple small ones, actually. J.D. McKissick had a stinger for the Detroit Lions, running back for them. And then Josh Allen suffered a shoulder injury against Oakland, but he did return, so he should be okay with this week, but just keep an eye on him. Like you said, Cook is the most major injury. There's a couple big IDP injuries. Bobby Wagner suffered a sprained ankle, the stud linebacker for Seattle. And then Jordan Whitehead, safety for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, one of the better safeties. He actually left as well. The hamstring injury as well. So Tampa Bay is hurting right now for injury-wise. But that's all I had other than the Cook one.
All right, why don't you go into your waiver wire?
Great. So we got actually some nice waiver wire pickups for you guys this week for the Super Bowl time, for the championship. One of the ones that we talked about briefly last week is going to be Brashard Perryman. Yeah, he went off this past week. He had 5 catches, 113 yards, and 3 tutties. So definitely pick him up with all the injuries with Godwin and Evans out. He's going to be the main guy. Winston's been looking pretty good the past few weeks. Definitely pick him up. We got a bear out here for Kiev. Anthony Miller, I do like him. I talked a little bit about him last week actually as well. He had 9 receptions, 118 yards, and a touchdown, and 15 targets. 15 targets is unheard of. So definitely pick him up if he's still out there. Another guy, he's been a disappointment this year as well. He could have been on that wide receiver list. But actually, Sterling Shepard, he's actually finally healthy, playing well. 9 receptions, 111 yards, and 11 targets. So another guy we definitely like. Danny Amendola, he had a nice week this week as well. 8 receptions, 13 targets, 102 yards. They're a little banged up at wide receiver with T.J. Hawkinson and Marvin Jones out. Danny Amendola should get some looks going forward.
Nice, absolutely, yeah. And I wonder what's going on there with Mike Boone sitting there. He got the touchdowns, and now everyone's going to pick up Mike Boone and Danny Amendola, or what's his name, Amir Abdullah is going to get the freaking touchdowns, So I don't know what's going on with that Cook injury, Dave. And that was the biggest one I had to mention, for waiver wire. Because Amir Abdullah is very capable, but Mike Boone did really well in the preseason. And now you also have Alexander Madison that missed last week and was a scratch. Is he not going to be scratched this week? So you might have to pick up 2 players there, if not 3, with Amir Abdullah for the Vikings injury, Dalvin Cook. And Dalvin Cook could even play. So this is all speculative ads, but hell, it's championship week, man. So if you're playing for 3rd place, if you're playing for a draft pick, or if you're playing for, obviously, the championship, those are your targets right there. And you might want to try to cock block your the guy you're facing, because he's probably going to try to pick those guys up if he needs them. So see if the guy you're facing had Dalvin Cook. That's an interesting thing right there. I have Greg Ward. He had a good game with Alshon Jeffrey out for the Eagles. So I like Greg Ward this week. And, they're playing the Cowboys. It's a division game. I expected them to be lightening it up a little bit. Danny Amendola, just like you said, Dave, only owned in 25% of leagues, 13 targets. He's catching the ball. He's the go-to guy. He's the bailout guy. And he's got a very high floor, in my opinion. So, I would start him over a lot of those hit-and-miss guys for sure. Anthony Miller, just like you said, 15 targets, man. He's due to take over as top receiver. A lot of speculation out there that the Bears might trade at Robinson to try to move up in that first round in the draft. So Anthony Miller would be the man in Chicago if that happens. James Washington had a good game, 11 targets for Pittsburgh. And Steven Sims, 11 targets for the Redskins. And good old their quarterback's playing a little bit better, Dwayne Haskins, good old Haskins. And that's interesting. We've seen him light it up a little bit. You know, that Eagles game, that was a good game until the very end there. And they're playing the Giants this week. A great matchup, right? The Giants have a terrible secondary. Cameron Brate, believe it or not, may be one of the few pass catchers left for Tampa Bay. So he could be a speculative add. And Brashard Perryman, like you said, Dave, this guy might be a wide receiver 1 this week. I think he is a wide receiver 1 this week. Yeah, he might be a top 3 wide receiver this week. And I didn't do a weekly ranking yet, but I'll tell you this: he's the man, and he's going to win somebody a fantasy championship this week, in my opinion. A couple D's to pick up that aren't owned is the Colts D playing Carolina at home. Carolina's a mess, and plus they're starting a rookie Will Grier. And that's going to be interesting. Rookies make mistakes, especially a gunslinger like Will Grier. Denver defense playing Detroit. You know, Detroit has David Blow at quarterback. Denver D is due for a step back after playing Kansas City. Miami's D is playing the Bengals, and the Bengals are terrible. Miami's D might get themselves a pick 6 like the Patriots did last week. And one more. I got Chris Conley. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they're playing a bad Atlanta secondary in Atlanta on the turf. You know, running on that carpet, he's going to get some plays and might get a couple touchdowns there. And you know that DJ Chark's out, so I like Conley here this week, man. So who are your trending up for Week 16?
All right, well, I do like Jameis Winston. He's been on fire the last 2 weeks, and why not against the Texans' horrible pass defense. I do like Jameis Winston this week, and Brashard Perryman for both those guys for the Buccaneers this week. I do like the 49ers against the Rams. They did play well against Seattle a couple weeks ago, but I do like the 49ers. I like Raheem Mostert against them. He looked good again this past week, so I do like him. I do like Devontae Parker for the Dolphins against the poor Bengals defense. Even Fitzmagic, I like him actually this week too against the Bengals. And then I like some of the Bengals as well, like Joe Mixon, and I do like Andy Dalton actually this week against the Dolphins' poor defense. So it's good matchups there for both on offense, not so much as defensive wise. I do like Delvin Hodges this week actually against the poor Jets pass defense. They do have a good run defense. So I don't like James Conner this week against them, but I do like Delvin Hodges this week if he does start again. He did look pretty good this past week. I do like Eli against the poor Redskins defense. So then you can see him going off. I like Slade and Shepard against the wide receivers for the Giants as well this week. And then I do like Marquise Brown possibly against the Browns. I can see him bouncing back here. He's been a little quiet lately, but I can see Marquise Brown having a good week against the Browns' poor defense. And then Gardner Minshew, I do like him against the Falcons, actually. Their poor pass defense. I can see him in a big week along with Chris Conley, who you just mentioned. I like both of them against the poor Falcons defense. And then I do like Phillip Rivers and Williams this week against the poor Raiders defense. I can see them having a good week as well.
Yeah, Phillip Rivers, man. This could be his last home game for the Chargers, you know. So that's always something to look at. That, you know, they kind of play out of their minds. You see how Eli did last week. You know, it's something to handicap for sure. So I know what you're talking about there. For Phillip Rivers, he could have a great game. Like them, man. Non-starters trending up for sure. Brashard Perryman. You know, I mean, he's the no-brainer. I mean, I don't even know if you're allowed to make him your nasty sleeper again, Dave, because he's top 3, man. So you better not hear him as your nasty sleeper. He is the for sure start, is what I'm trying to say. So just wanted to throw that out there. Cameron Brate, like I said, pass catcher for the bus. Raheem Mostert, over 50% of the carries. He's the new man in San Fran, and they're playing the Rams, who got run up on last week. The Cowboys, both running backs had over 100 yards against the Rams last week. So I expect Mostert to have a big game this week. Chris Conley, like I said, against Atlanta's bad D, I like him. I like Jarvis Landry bouncing back against the Ravens there. I like Marlon Mack. And he had a terrible game tonight, but that's what he's going to do, have a terrible game. Then he'll play the Panthers' terrible run D and light it up. Patrick Laird, I like him a lot versus a bad Bengals rush D, worse than the league for the Dolphins. And Greg Ward for the Eagles needs a big game versus Big D. And Mike Boone, as long as Cook's out, he's playing the Packers at home. I can see him getting a third of the touches or better. And Philip Lindsay versus a bad Lions defense. I like Philip Lindsay a ton this week as well. So I'm going to move right into Bus, then Dave. And I only have a few of them. I have 5. And I was wrong about this guy last week. So I'm going to double down and go at him again. And your boy, Aaron Jones, running back, now he's on the road playing the Vikings. So I expect this more to be a passing shootout than a running game. I like the Vikings D here. I really do. I think this is a much more important game to the Vikings than it is to the Packers. It's a Monday Night Football game. I think Aaron Jones will be a bust. I think Derrick Henry versus the Saints, as you just saw what the Saints did to the Colts, he's not going to be as good as he's been. If you look at what the Titans have been doing, it was through an easier part of their schedule. So now that things are getting a little harder, we'll see what they're really made of. Todd Gurley, running back, versus a pissed off 49ers team that just lost to the Falcons. I don't like Gurley this week at all. I don't like Sam Darnold versus the Steelers' sack defense, and I don't like Carlos Hyde versus a tough Tampa Bay run defense. Dave, who are your busts?
I definitely agree with you on Gurley. 49ers at home after a loss. I don't like Gurley or Goff this week at 49ers at San Francisco, so that's going to be definitely a tough game. Downgrading the Bills as well. Josh Allen and Devin Singletary, I think, are going to have a tough time against the Patriots defense as well. They're playing at home as well, so 2 tough matchups there on the Saturday game, so definitely downgrading them. I do agree, too, with against Steelers. I don't see Donald having a good day against them, so I agree with you on most of those. And then I say, too, the Browns, I don't see them having – Ravens' defense is actually pretty solid. I'm downgrading Mayfield if you're starting him and OBJ. Landry, I think, is their best receiver, so I'm not going to downgrade him. But I say OBJ and Mayfield for sure against the Ravens. And then I'm also going to downgrade Aaron Jones against the Vikings as well. I do agree with you on that one this week. I didn't agree last week, and then he had a big week. But I'm definitely downgrading this week against the Vikings. They do have a tough D. And then I'm going to say the Chiefs running backs, too. I don't see them doing well against the Bears. Tough run D. Who's ever's playing for the Chiefs, who even knows who's starting for them this week? McCoy or Darwin Thompson. So definitely downgrading them as well against the tough Bears D.
Yeah. The thing about the Bears is you wonder who's going to show up. I think they're probably going to bench Akeem Hicks and shut him down for the year. But their second string is really good, too. So, that's going to be an interesting game. Very interesting because you have Nagy with his former mentor, Andy Reid. That's a storyline. And then you have the whole Mahomes versus Trubisky thing when the Bears drafted Trubisky way ahead of Mahomes. No, in the Bears' credit here, and I know they were stupid to trade up a play for him, but Trubisky was a top quarterback in most people's draft boards. It was just because a bunch of stupid, speculatists, I call them, people that speculate, looking at a guy that played for North Carolina that's tall. It's supposed to be awesome when Deshaun Watson's just sitting there. Man, I can go on forever about that. But, it's just kind of like one of those things where one person copies the next and all of a sudden this guy's number one on the draft board. So, but I don't blame the Bears because that's what people go by. I do blame them for a lot of the other draft picks like Shaheen and stuff like that. So, but there's going to be a big story to this game is my point. And I think that it might bring out the Bears trying to win this game as well. It's hard to predict motivation. It really is in this league. And maybe they'll just, try to win these last 2 games either way because, hey, they don't have a first-round draft pick anyway next year. So it's not like it's not like you're proving your draft position by doing this much, except a little bit in the second round. So there it is, Dave. Who is your nasty sleeper or sleepers for the week?
All right, well, I have one this week because you ruled out Perryman, but I did have him last week as well. But I'm going with Raheem Mostert. I do like him at home, 49ers. He's getting a lot of the carries for them now. And after the Rams just were shredded by Dallas last week, I'm going with him as my D-Nasty sleeper of the week.
All right, I've got some ugly ones for you this week. 2 of them. One is Patrick Laird for the Miami Dolphins. I think they're going to win one more game here, and it's going to be against the terrible Bengals. And the Bengals already have a win, so they don't have to play out of their minds by any reason. But I think that Patrick Laird's going to run all over them and score a couple touchdowns. And I like Chris Conley, as I stated before, against the Falcons. The Falcons are in a letdown spot. They just beat the 49ers, so their defense should be open for business this week, my man. Any final thoughts about Fantasy Football Championship Week?
I would say go Pack go. It's nice to see the Pack take out this Bears this past week and eliminate them from the playoffs.
You had to, didn't you?
And then I was to say good luck in the championships everywhere, and hopefully you can get to the promised land and win the championship in your leagues.
All right, thanks so much, Dave. This was our last fantasy show for this year. We might do a fantasy preseason for baseball just in late February, early March or something. Just kind of, if you're in a baseball league, just a quick one to help give you a couple draft picks for this coming year. But either way, Dave, thank you so much for the whole year, man. Really appreciate you coming on. You make everybody better when you do this, and all the fans love it out there.
Thanks. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure.
All right, that was D Nasty. If you have any questions for us, please tweet us at the Odds Breakers. Have a fantastic rest of your week and go get some winners.